Alrighty, welcome back to the Defying Gravity podcast with Zach Goodman. Today we're going to talk about one of the topics that I get the most questions on, which is the brief maximal tension method. Today I am going to basically talk about brief maximal tension. I'm going to overview, refresh some of you that are not familiar with what that is. I'm going to overview kind of the weekly structure of how we're doing that. We're going to talk about some waves, linear versus undulating, some problems that I've encountered using the brief maximal tension method, how I've solved it, how much you need to change every workout, and then how you're going to progress into chaos, as I call it. Okay. So just kind of overviewing the brief maximal tension method. Okay. So going back to, I think a couple podcasts ago, if you go on Spotify or YouTube, you should be able to find it. But essentially, what the brief maximal tension is, it's just a sub method of max effort. And so, all we're using the brief maximal tension method for is for the development of absolute strength. So, we are trying to create the strongest athlete possible using the brief maximal tension method. Okay, so this is not a method for direct rate of force development training, although it is going to raise rate of force development just inherently because you're raising the amount of force an athlete has access to. This is just essentially going to widen or raise that glass of force. Okay, so we're going to have the ability to call upon more force and create more force because we are increasing our capacity via absolute strength. Okay, so this is a absolute or maximal strength training method. Okay. Again, I have a YouTube video or Spotify podcast, whatever you want to call it. I have already have some information out on that. If you haven't already watched those videos, make sure you go back and watch those videos. But this is going to be the ideal method of strength training for young athletes. Okay. To kind of put it in a nutshell, okay, with an untrained or immature nervous system, they simply can't call upon all motor units in synchronization, okay, very quickly with things like singles. And when we start approaching, high rep ranges like potentially eights and tens, okay, we start damaging discharge frequencies, which is going to essentially deteriorate what makes athletes explosive. Okay, athletes need to be able to call upon and produce force very, very quickly. They need to be able to coordinate motor units very quickly. Okay, they need to rate code quickly. Okay, so what this method is going to do is going to be the perfect middle ground of being able to stimulate an entire athlete's spectrum of motor units. Okay, it's also going to allow us to discharge motor units at an optimal discharge frequency. So our athletes are essentially getting the best of both worlds. They're raising maximal strength, but they're doing so in a way that will not harm discharge frequencies. If anything, it's going to enhance it. Okay, so that's kind of our quick little overview of why we're using this method. Okay, again, this is ideal for a young, immature athlete. Okay, by young, immature, I'm talking about athletes with low training age. I'm talking about athletes that have less than 5, 6 years of training age. Realistically, you can use the brief maximal tension method really for your entire training career, just assuming that you are managing volume and you are managing frequency appropriately. But really, past 5, 6, 7, 8 years, you should be able to kind of know how to start doing that for yourself. If you work with athletes, you're probably never going to have them for that long, anyways. If you're lucky, you get them really young and you get them for 6, 7, 8 years. But also understand athletes are never that consistent in training. They miss sessions, they miss time off, they get hurt in sports. Okay. Their training is never going to be 6, 7, 8+ years of straight training like it is for us that don't play sports anymore, where we just basically train all year round. So you're really never going to have to not use this method, in my opinion. I really don't know when you'd ever not try to use this method in your training. It's way more potent than max effort for athletes that don't have years and years, really up to a decade of plus of training, especially people who've never trained right and trained correctly in the first place. Okay. That's my bias there. That's what I think is best. You don't have to listen to me, but you're here to listen to me. So that's why we're going to go through this. Okay. Um, Overview weekly work. My next thing I have in my little notes. Okay, our weekly structure, we follow an upper lower split. I see my athletes 4 days a week on a perfect week. So we have an upper day, a lower day, upper, lower. Okay, so that's kind of how the structure of the training lays out as far as the split goes. I use the brief maximal tension every day. Okay, so I use the brief maximal tension for lower body exercises. I also use it for the upper body exercises. Okay, we use this primarily with main lifts. Okay, so think about derivatives of the bench, squat, and deadlift. We do not use this method as often with accessory work, but we do still use it. So things like chin ups, I'll use it for incline pressing, deadlifting, good mornings, RDL, anything like that. Okay. Primarily main lifts, but also supplemental lifts. Okay. Accessory single joint exercises, almost never use it. Okay. I think there's some more value using different methods in those particular exercises, so we don't use it there, right? If you're familiar with conjugate training, you'll understand what I'm saying. Maybe I'll go through the methods and why I use what in a different podcast, but primarily for brief maximal intention, that's why you're here. Um, so one of the first things I did when I first started using the brief maximal tension method was I tried to make it make sense for me, but also make sense for my athletes. Because here's the thing: is if you try to use methods that make sense to you, but the athletes don't understand, then it literally doesn't matter. Okay, so you can try to do everything you want to do. It can be perfect on paper. You can do it. You can understand everything how it's supposed to work. But if your athletes have no idea what they're doing or they don't understand it, then it's not going to work. So you need to have a system that you can apply that makes sense and is evidence-based, scientific-based, if you want to call it. You want a system that gets results. We want a system that kids can understand, especially in large groups, so then they can run it themselves. Okay. Um, so my first entry into brief maximal tension was I used a lot of kind of like linear type patterning as far as like using brief maximal tension. Again, brief maximal tension is really the use of 3 to 5 reps above 85% of training max. Okay, so a 1 rep max, you want to be using loads that are over 85%. So for example, if you're using triples, you're probably using in the 90%. Whereas if you're using fives, you're probably using like 85%. Realistically, we use more than that, and we go over 100% within weeks of taking a wire max because my kids get strong really fast. Okay. But if a true max, you want to be using loads that are very, very heavy. Okay. I don't do training max, like I don't do percentages, but if I had to put percentages on, that is what it's defined as. Okay. So my first kind of way I was doing this is I was patterning it in a linear fashion. And so I've talked to people about this before, kind of like my first really like like my first year and a half of doing this. We used a lot of like linear patterning. And I made kids really strong. Okay. Kids got really strong doing that. It worked. Okay. But there was a couple downsides and pitfalls that I saw, and this is why I made kind of the undulation changes that I made. Okay. So kind of the way that the patterning worked out originally was like basically going in some sort of pattern of a 4 week span, basically moving from fives to fours to threes. Okay. It may have looked like having a fives week, a fours week, a threes week. Maybe it looked like 5-4-3, 5-4-3, however you wanted to divvy it up. But that's essentially what it looked like, right? It was just like a normal West Side pattern where you'd have like higher volumes to start and you'd end with, higher intensities, lower volumes. If you look at a dynamic effort like wave, that's kind of the way it ends up. If you look at really any block periodization, a strength wave, that's kind of how it ends up. So essentially, I was using, reps between three, fours, and fives, over 85% loads every single week. And we were basically just like tapering volume down through our entire week or entire 3 week wave. Then we just basically restart and boom. Okay. You can see like Jim Wendler does this like 5-1, for example. Like he doesn't do brief maximal tension because the training weights are way too low, but like patterning wise, it makes sense. Okay. It's not the way I would do it now, but it's the way that like I originally kind of started doing it, not 5-1, but in that same like linearly pattern. Okay. But I had some problems. This is why I changed. Okay. For me, I'm married to the result. I want everybody to get great results, not just like the new training kids and not just the older training kids. So you need methods that kind of fit everybody. And so what I've kind of created and came up with, um, I don't know how to understate this enough. It literally works for everybody. Like I have yet to find an athlete who cannot do this from literally sixth graders to like Division I college athletes. Literally everybody does this and it freaking works every single time. Undoubtedly, it works every single time. Okay. The way that I do it literally works every time. Like I've basically solved the problems I was having before, and we're still able to use brief mass tension method. And in my opinion, like I really have a system that freaking works for everybody. Okay. And that's what I'm going to kind of talk to you about today. Okay. So my original problem with the linear patterning. Okay. Couple things. First thing, we were still touching heavy loads. Okay. Heavy fives, heavy triples, you're still touching heavy loads. So that was great. Problem was this, okay? If you go a fives week, so say you go 5-5, right? You run into this problem where you have one really good fives day and one really bad fives day. Okay, that happened a lot. Okay, so I ran into this problem where I'm like, okay, that can't work. That's not going to work. Like my young kids obviously can add more weight and just keep going up every workout. My older kids, a lot of them could do that, but not everybody could do it. And like for me, I don't want to just like have 2/3 or like 3/4 of my kids all getting stronger. Like I want every single kid getting stronger. Okay. So I figured that out and I'm like, okay, we need to fix something. What can I do? Like for myself, what would I do in my situation? Like I'm someone who's trained for 13, 14 years now of like consistent training, real training, um, what would I do? Okay. The biggest thing you have to do, what does everybody do when they get to a really strong point? They can't just add 5 pounds, right? Like the classic 3x5, add 5 pounds of workout. You have to start changing velocities, right? I mean, like West Side does this. They do max effort and dynamic effort, right? 5-3-1 does this. They go from fives to triples. Every strength plan you can imagine, they all just attempt to change velocity in order to aid in recovery. Okay. At the end of the day, every strength system is doing the same thing. We're trying to add 5 pounds or add a rep. Everybody's doing the exact same thing in some way or another, whether you are conjugate or you are linear or you are whatever the hell you want to call yourself, everybody's doing the same thing. Okay. If you're conjugate, you are adding 5 pounds, you're adding a rep to your max effort lift every rotation. So if I have 3 weeks, I'm adding 5 pounds to my max. Okay. Louis always says if you can add 5 pounds every time you do the lift, you can do 60 pounds a year. Right. Okay, that's how the math works out. If you have a 4 week rotation. So velocity change is what I settled on. Like, okay, this is what everybody's doing. This is what you should do. Like at its very core, all everyone's doing is seeking plus 5 pounds or plus 1 rep. And the only way to basically overcome accommodation is a change in velocity. So how do I change velocity? How do I take what I'm doing now and change velocity enough for my older athletes to get strong, but not too much to where my younger athletes are just freaking thrown on a whack? Okay. So essentially what undulating the training does, what it does is by changing the reps, changing the actual volume and the velocity change, it allows for better recovery and allows for better sessions. Like not every day is going to be your best day, but if I can program it in to where even if you're having a crappy day, you can still add weight to your last session or go up a rep, perfect, right? So for us, like that's the minimum. Like what I'm seeking every session, literally whether you are like the most trained kid or least trained kid, I'm always seeking 5 more pounds or a rep. If I can go more than that, great. If I can't, that's the minimum. That's what we're always seeking. And really, to be honest with you, I don't have anybody that really can't do that. If the training's correct, if the rest is correct, if they're doing everything the way they're supposed to, literally everybody should be able to add 5 pounds or add a rep every single time, no matter if you're super strong and you're a 600-pound deadlifter or a 300 plus pound bencher, or you are a 50-pound bencher. Everybody should be able to increase, okay, with this. And I literally don't have any problems having that happen. So we need the velocity change to aid in recovery and to set stronger guys up for better lifting days. It also allows younger athletes really to drive the needle faster, to be honest with you. Like younger athletes, if you train a lot of them, you realize how aggressive they get when they start getting into the numbers. And so it really gives them a way to almost drive their numbers up faster. Okay. So how much should we change every workout? We know we need a velocity change. How do you change velocity? You either change it with reps or you change it with load. Here's something I want you to understand. Okay. When I do a set of 5, okay, or I do a set of 3, okay, my first rep in a set of 5 is faster than my first rep in a set of 3. Okay. My last rep in a set of 5 may be the same speed as my last rep in a set of 3, but my first rep in both of those are different speeds. Okay. So if I'm doing a 5 rep max, let's say, my first rep might be at a 0.6, 0.7 meters per second. And then by the end of it, I'm at that 0.3, 0.4. You know what I mean? Who knows? Depending on how explosive the athlete is versus how much of a grinder they are. Again, let's just ballpark it. Okay. My first set of 3 is literally never going to be the same speed as my 5 rep max. That first rep is pretty much never going to be the same. It's always going to be a little bit slower because you are training closer to failure. Okay. When you use heavier loads, you train closer to failure, which is the reason that discharge frequencies work with low reps, is because you are operating closer to maximal motor unit recruitment. Okay. If 1 rep is maximal motor unit recruitment, that slowest rep you can get, then every rep after that is a little bit further away. Okay. The only problem is, why wouldn't you just use singles all the time? Because most athletes need those initial couple reps to reach maximal motor unit recruitment. They also are able to get multiple strains and recover from them. Think about if you did a heavy set of 3. All 3 reps are going to be probably a grind, right? There's probably not going to be any reps that just bang, right? Unless if you're using correct loading. That means you can get multiple strains. Okay. Where does that beat up advanced lifters? Those multiple strains. Okay. So when we're looking at it from that perspective, that's why you wouldn't just use ones. That's why you would use, triples, fours, fives, etc. Okay. So reps and loads are always changes in velocity. When I change my rep scheme, I'm changing velocity. When I add more load, I'm changing velocity. When I take load off the bar, I'm changing velocity, assuming that your intention is always the same. I'm always lifting maximally. I'm always trying to move the bar as fast as possible. I am letting the load and I am letting the rep scheme change my velocity. Okay. So, how much do we need to change every workout for this to work? Here's essentially what I figured out. Okay. In order for an athlete, again, we're chasing 5 more pounds, we're chasing 1 plus rep. Okay. In order for an athlete to add 5 pounds every single time, they need to drop at least 2 reps. Okay. So again, in order for an athlete to add 5 pounds, whether they have a good day or bad, at least 5 pounds, they need to have about 2 reps in drop. So if I go from sixes, I go to fours. Okay. That means if I have so let's say I squat 300 pounds for sets of six. If I need to get 305, I might not be able to get 5 pounds for my next set. Say I have a terrible day, might not be able to get it for 305 for a set of six the next time. Maybe I have a terrible day. Maybe not even do five. But if I go to four, I can 100% get 305 for fours, right? Probably going to go for more. So probably going to go, for example, like 300 for six, maybe 315 for four or 320 for four. Okay. So I'm increasing load. Basically, 2 reps guarantees you're getting a load progression. Okay. If you drop 2 reps, it's a guaranteed load progression. But what do you do when you get down to zero? You can't just go down forever, right? If we're using low rep sets, you can't go down forever. Okay. What's the next best option? Add a rep, right? If I can get 305 for four or 320 for four, well, if I made adaptation, I probably can get it for 5 reps. Okay, I probably can add a rep at least in one of those brief maximal tension sets. Okay. So again, we're seeking an increase in load or we're seeking an increase in reps. Okay, but we stay within that 3 to 6 rep range, 2 to 6 rep range, right? Brief maximal tension is 3 to 5. We'll dabble in some sixes, we'll dabble in some triples, but a lot of our training is at threes, fours, and fives. Okay. So you need an increase in load, you need an increase in reps. So how do we do that? You need to either drop the reps, a couple reps for your next session, or you need to increase the rep by 1 and keep the same weight. So if you want an increase in load, you need to pull down the reps a little bit. If you want an increase in a rep, you just add a rep to it. Okay, it's pretty simple. Okay. So that's how much you need to change every workout. You need to change a couple reps, or you need to keep the same load and go up a rep. It's that simple, right? It's very simple, not super hard, not super complicated. Okay. So how do you progress in the chaos, right? How would you progress this? For example, I'm going to show you an example wave and like show you how you would do that. Um, how does this look on paper? Okay, so let's say I'm going back to my original point, and we have an upper lower split, right? So I see these guys 4 days a week, which means let's say upper body training, I see them for 2 bench days a week. Our main lift is the bench press. We only do the bench press on those 2 days, right? For our main lift. So for example, I wouldn't have a bench press and then an incline bench day. I would just bench press both days, or I would close grip bench both days. I would keep my main lift the exact same both sessions. Okay. I would not change the main lift. I would change the accessory lift. So again, day 1, it's a bench press. Day 3, it's a bench press. Okay. It's not day 1 bench, day 3 incline bench. We do the same lift. Okay. I think I have a podcast out on that too. So on paper, what does this look like? Okay. So I laid out a very easy one. This is one that I've used in the past that I like. It's not what we're using currently, but it's one that I've had success with, and you could probably copy and paste this into your own workouts, and it probably would work pretty good. Especially once you get the hang of actually how to like teach all your kids how to do it and like how to actually like pick weights. Um, so for example, if we have a bench day, okay, the first bench day, day 1 upper, say I give them sixes. Okay, we do sixes on the bench. Okay. Say on day 2, so we know that we have sixes on the bench. That's the upper threshold of your weights, right? It's the upper threshold of your rep scheme. We're never going over 6 reps. We know it's going to hinder discharge frequency. So we really stay. Six is like the upper threshold, the highest we're ever going to go. Okay. So where do we go from sixes? We don't go all the way down to twos, right? That's a huge change. You don't need that big of a change, right? It just needs to be a little bit, right? Again, going back to the law of accommodation, you have qualitative and you have quantitative change, okay? Looking at some other training principles, it makes more sense to wave reps and sets rather than wave exercises all the time when we're looking at trying to overcome accommodation, okay? If you're looking to get really strong at a lift, okay? Which is why you see a lot of power lifters nowadays not change exercises as much. They do a lot of changing rep schemes rather than changing, lifts. Some of that's good, some of that's bad, okay? But this is what we do, okay? So day one, we're using sixes. Say we have a kid that benches, I don't know, what's a normal bench? Um, I don't know, 225 for sixes. Okay. Have a kid bench 225 for sixes. We want a load increase on day two in that week, or technically day three, because day two is a lower body day. Okay. So we go sixes. What would you want to do? You want to have a load increase. What if this kid has a terrible day? We still want to have a load increase to show improvement. We still want to progress in some way. Okay. So we'd go fours. We'd drop 2 reps off. We'd go from sixes to fours. Okay. So our bench for the week, we'd have 2 bench days. We'd have a 6 day. We'd have a 4 day. Okay. That's it. Okay. With the goal being sixes, set some sort of, kind of standard progression throughout the entire wave. If I set 225 for sixes, that's the lightest I'm ever going to go for the rest of the training wave. I'm never going to go lighter than 225. Perfect. Okay, so I go from sixes to 25. Say we go to fours day. How much weight would you want to increase? Well, we need at least 5 pounds. Realistically, when you actually do this, you're going to see athletes generally are going to probably be able to go up 10 to 15 pounds on their bench day. So, for example, I take a kid that does 225 for six. We go to fours, okay, and we go to let's just say 235. Okay, hammers 235 feels really good. Perfect. Okay, week two. Okay, we have 2 bench days. We had our sixes and our fours. What do we do now? Okay, do we go down to twos and try to beat that again? Maybe, maybe an option. Not the option I'm picking, but maybe. Okay, because here's my thing: is I not only want to increase load, I also want to increase our reps. Okay, because that's the best 2 ways to increase an athlete's strength is either do more reps with the same training load or do more load with the same reps. Okay, so we go from sixes, we go to fours. Think about the velocity change between a sets of six and sets of four. Okay, a set of six, that first rep is probably really fast because you're doing six, you're 6 reps away from failure. Okay, and fours, you're 4 reps away from failure. Okay, so we go from sixes, we go to fours. That's a pretty big velocity change. What you do for sixes, you're probably going to be able to do quite a bit more for your fours. We're still operating at a relatively high intensity, right? We're still operating within that 85+%. Your 6 day is probably right around 85% of a training max. Your 4 day is probably in the 90s, right? It's probably like 87 and a half, 90%. You're probably going up 10, 15 plus pounds on a squat, probably going up more. Deadlift, probably going up more. Okay. So in a perfect world, that's what it would look like. Week two, I want to go up from fours. So I always operate off the last training session. I don't look past multiple training sessions. I always go off the last one, right? I'm always concerned just adding a little bit more from the last one. That's all I care about. Okay. My lens on my athletes is very short because they don't have a large training age. They don't need a really wide lens yet. Okay. So previous performances, unless they have an absolutely garbage day, I'm always looking at the last day they did. So maybe they had a completely terrible day, were sick, freaking terrible. Then I'll look at the previous sessions and that, but for the most part, I'm always working a session back. Okay, so we go from fours, then we go to fives. Okay, so I increase load in week one. I want to increase reps the next session. So I'm gonna whatever I say I did 235 for four. Say 235, 240. I'm gonna now try to get 235, 240 for five. Okay, so if I went from 225 for six, and then I did 240 for four, and then I did 240 for five, is 225 for six, is 240 for five better? 240 for five is better. Okay, it's a 15-pound increase in load and only 1 rep drop. You see how this starts to stack up. You see how it starts to sequence. It works out pretty good. Okay, so now we went from six to four to five. Okay, so we're up, down, back up, and now we're coming back down again. Okay. So what would you want to do from fives? Well, you'd want to have another 2 rep drop. You'd want to probably increase load. Okay. So what this looks like again, from big picture thinking, we're either increasing load or increasing reps. I just came off an increasing rep day, so now I want to increase load. Okay. So now I go to threes. Okay. If you got it for five, you literally can't mess up. You can only, if very minimal, you add 5 pounds to your bench. Okay. So I think we said we were at 240 for five. Perfect. Okay. Now let's go to 250 for three or 255 for three. Probably 250 for three. Easy, right? 10 pounds up. You're dropping 2 reps. Probably smoking it. Probably getting 250 for three. Pretty good. Okay. So now we're at 250 for three. Perfect. Okay. And now we want to increase the reps again. Okay. So we got 250 for three. Now I want to get 250 for four. Okay. If I get 250 for four on that third week, that means on week one, what was my original fours? My original fours was 235 or 240 pounds. Now I'm 10 pounds up in literally a week. You see how fast that stacks up? Once you understand how fast these little progressions make, then you start seeing how you get kids to add 10, 15, 20 pounds to the bench in literally a month. And then you start seeing how you can get kids to literally add, 15, 20, 30 pounds to a squat in a month. And you do it repeatedly over and over and over and over and over until they go back to their sport or they stop showing up or whatever. Till they get sick or get an injury and then they step back and then you get them back and then you have to start building back up again. You'll see how fast this works. Okay. So I hit fours. That's, again, 235 for fours originally. Now we're at 250 for fours. And this literally happens just like this. This literally happens. Okay. Now, where do we go from our fours? We drop two more reps. We go to doubles. Okay. Doubles is really the lowest I'm ever going to go. Okay. So we did 250 for fours. Maybe we throw them 260 for a set of doubles. Say it moves pretty good. Maybe we go 265 for a set of doubles. Okay. Boom. This happens a lot too. When they get down to doubles, their freaking numbers go up pretty fast. Okay. By the end of that third week, that last week, usually numbers are freaking way up and we can hit some pretty cool things for doubles. And sometimes I'll even throw them a single, like a heavy top single, and then like do two back downs. Not always, but sometimes I'll do that, throw them a bone a little bit. Okay. We did that this last week, which is pretty cool. Had a couple new kids join the 300 bench club, which is cool. All underclassmen and a freshman hit 315. I'll post that video up on social media. That was pretty cool. So getting back to our previous session, so we got doubles and we got, let's say, 265. Okay. So when I look back, literally, so we're on week 3. If I look back literally 2 weeks ago, okay, we did 225 for 6, and now we're doing 265 for doubles. So it's a 40-pound increase, 4-rep difference. Okay. If you could do 225 for 6, were you able to do 260 for 2? Probably not originally. Okay. That's a pretty good jump. It's probably about 10 or 15 pounds of your bench in a month. Okay. You see how this is so simple. Okay. It is so simple when you are changing reps and you're really the hardest thing, really the skill gap between like myself and someone who tries to do this is literally just knowing your athletes and then picking the correct weights. That is literally the difference. Like anybody can copy and paste this exact 3-week wave and probably be pretty successful. All you have to know is know your athletes and know how to pick their weights. If their weights are picked correctly, every single athlete should progress. If their weights are not picked correctly, they may progress a little bit. Okay. So then it becomes on you as a coach to pick the weights correctly for every single kid. For the most part, I always err a little bit more conservative and not in the fact where I don't let kids miss and we don't strain. I just am always thinking about the next workout. I'm like very like, what can we do the next one? If I can get this for this, what can we do next? What can we do next? What can we do next? I'm always concerned about the next one. I'm concerned about the previous one. I'm concerned about the next one. Okay. So that's kind of the way that I view the actual like training, but that is literally undulation in like the most simplest means. Okay. All undulation is just a change in volume and velocity. Okay. If I go from sets of 6 to sets of 4, did I have a change of volume? Yes, I did, because now I'm getting less total reps. Okay. If I am changing from 6s to 4s, am I getting a change of velocity? Yes, because I'm still operating with max intent, but now I'm 6 reps away from, 0 versus 4 reps away from 0. So my speeds are slower on my 4s than they are for my 6s. My first rep is a different speed. My first couple reps, different speed. Okay. This is how simple it is. You could literally set up your training just like this. Okay. When you start getting creative with this, is where I'm at now. Again, this is like the original. This is the way I can make it make the most sense in this particular training wave. When you start getting kind of past this, maybe I'll talk like about like an advanced, more brief max potential way like my kids are using. If you read like some of the Chinese weightlifting programming and information that's out of like the limited stuff that we do have, you'll start to see that basically all they're doing is brief maximal tension training, and they use similar kind of means, except for the only difference is that they use more progressive sets versus like me where I do more straight sets. But really, like the changing is really a lot the same. Like weightlifting programming is actually a lot the same from like this. If you go back and read some of the Soviet stuff, like the throwers, you'll realize a lot of their training is kind of the same thing. So again, this is what I've kind of came across as like kind of not perfecting my system, but what I will say is this is so much better than the linear way that I was doing before. Um, I think it just works so much better. And like my athletes' numbers speak for themselves. My kids have gotten stronger faster than ever have. And the athletes that I had that come back for like winter breaks and spring breaks and stuff from college, like they can't believe how strong the kids have gotten. It's just like we're doing the same thing. We've just made a few tweaks so we have less bad days. That's what this is all about, right? We're all chasing plus 5 pounds plus a rep. How do you limit the bad days? The best way to limit bad days is to change the velocity. That is literally about change volume, change velocity. It's the reason why everybody does, heavy light sessions work pretty good. It's the reason people use RPE. What everyone's trying to do is do the exact same thing. And how are people changing? They're all using the same means, whether they say it or not. It is change in volume and change in velocity. If you change those two things, you will be set up for success and strength. Okay. Um, I have scroll through. I have one, two, three, four, five, six, seven. Okay. I have seven daily undulating periodization waves that my athletes have used and have used with success. If you guys want me to like go through like this was just like the very like, original one that makes the most sense. And you guys want to get into some weeds and some brief maximal tension stuff, I got like seven different ones that like I've used and experimented with. And I've started to get more into like instead of just having like a doubles day or a fours day or a fives day, I've started giving like some fives and like, I've started changing inner set some of the rep schemes we were using, and that's had some pretty good success. Like maybe giving them two sets of five and a set of triple, and then changing like so now we're starting to undulate like within the actual session instead of like session by session. We're like literally changing within the session. So if you guys want me to get in the weeds on that stuff, we'll get in the weeds on that. But it's really important that you understand like the very basics of this system for it to work the way it works. This is as basic as I can really make it, like without you guys like literally sitting here with me and like looking at a sheet of paper. Um, but if this made sense to you, like I hope it did. If it didn't, reach out to me, shoot me a DM, or set up a call with me and we'll talk. But like this is the most basic way I could kind of explain what I'm currently doing. But like I said, if you guys want to get in the weeds on some of the brief maximal tension stuff, I got a bunch of stuff to share. Like I said, I am literally just waiting for somebody. I'm waiting for the opportunity to just like go to one of these conferences and just freaking lay down the book and be like, here we go. We're going into it. Um, I know there's been some talks of like hosting a conjugate seminar. If me and Bidney could just sit down and lay the book down, like it would be sweet. So, um, but yeah, that's all I got for you guys. If you have suggestions or you want me to put out some other stuff, let me know. I do have a bunch of topics. I just sometimes I get motivated to talk about certain things. I had a phone call with the coach tonight that motivated me a little bit to talk more about kind of some of the strength stuff that I'm doing. So it makes a little bit more sense. But hopefully you gain some things out of us. Like I said, if you have questions, let me know. Um, that is all I have for you. Peace.